I didn't fight back. I didn't cry. I just picked up my phone and made one call. That's the part my brother never saw coming. He thought I was the same person I'd been my whole life. The one who showed up, paid up, and shut up. The one who believed that family meant something, even when family kept proving it didn't. He was wrong. Let me back up. My name is Rachel. I'm 31 years old. I work in commercial real estate in Charlotte, North Carolina. Specifically in contract management, which means I spend my days making sure agreements are airtight, that language is precise, that no one can walk away from a deal claiming they didn't understand what they signed. I'm good at my job. I'm meticulous. I notice things. I say this not to brag, but because what happened with my brother, what I allowed to happen, still embarrasses me when I think about it too long. Because I knew better. I knew every single warning sign. I just chose to ignore them, the way you ignore a check engine light for 6 months because you don't want to deal with what it might mean. My brother's name is Derek. He's 36, 5 years older than me, and for most of my life, he was my favorite person. When our parents divorced, I was 9. Derek was 14. He made me grilled cheese at midnight when I couldn't sleep. He drove me to school when our mom's car got repossessed. He was the constant in a childhood that had very few constants. So when he came to me 3 years ago with the restaurant idea, I listened. He'd been working in the food industry for over a decade. Sous chef at a mid-range steakhouse, then kitchen manager at a hotel restaurant downtown. He knew food. He had regulars who loved him. He had a concept that was genuinely interesting, a southern comfort food place with a rotating seasonal menu located in Noda, the arts district in Charlotte that had been exploding with foot traffic. He'd already done the research. He had a potential location. He had a name, Ember Table. What he didn't have was capital. He needed $60,000 to cover the first and last month of lease, initial equipment, licensing, build-out costs, and 3 months of operating buffer. He'd been saving for years but only had about $22,000. He'd talked to 2 small business lenders and been turned down. His credit wasn't terrible, but without collateral, no one wanted to take the risk on a first-time restaurant owner. Then he called me. I want to be honest about why I said yes. It wasn't just because he was my brother. It was because I believed in him. I'd eaten his food 100 times at family dinners, at his apartment, at pop-up events he'd done for friends. The man could cook. And I had the money. I'd sold a condo I bought in 2019 at exactly the right time, walked away with a significant profit, and had been sitting on it in a high-yield savings account trying to decide what to do next. But I also want to be honest about the other reason. The guilt reason. The one I didn't say out loud. Derek had been there for me when our family fell apart. I'd spent my 20s building a career while he'd been the one to actually show up. Visiting our mom in the hospital when she had her knee surgery, dealing with our stepdad's nonsense, being present in ways that I, frankly, wasn't. I thought this was my chance to even the ledger, to be there for him the way he'd been there for me. That's the part that got me. Not the business case. The guilt. Still, I wasn't reckless. This is the part that matters. Before I wrote a single check, I sat down with my attorney, a woman named Gloria Sims who I'd worked with on several property deals and who I trusted completely. I told her what I was doing. She drafted an investment agreement. It took 2 weeks, 2 revision rounds, and cost me $800 in legal fees, which I did not begrudge at all. The agreement was specific. I was investing $60,000 in exchange for a 30% equity stake in Ember Table LLC. Derek retained 70% and full operational control. The agreement outlined buyout terms, profit-sharing thresholds, what would happen in the event of a sale, and most importantly, that any future changes to the LLC's ownership structure required written consent from both parties. Derek read it. He asked a few questions. He signed it. His wife, Melissa, was not mentioned in the agreement because at the time, she was not a business partner. She was his wife. That distinction matters. I'm going to come back to it. The first year was genuinely exciting. Ember Table opened in March, and the response was beyond what any of us expected. A local food blogger wrote about it 3 weeks after opening, and the place was booked solid for 6 weeks. Derek was in his element. I would stop by sometimes just to watch him in the kitchen, moving with this focused calm that I'd never seen in him in any other context. He was born to do this. Melissa worked front of house. That was fine. She was good with people, charming when she wanted to be, and Derek trusted her. She did the floor manager role unofficially, seating guests, handling complaints, managing the servers. It made sense. She was there. She was capable. What I didn't notice, because I wasn't looking, because I was busy with my own work and my own life and I trusted my brother, was what was happening on the administrator side. Melissa had started handling the bookkeeping. Again, not inherently a problem. Small restaurants often run on family labor, but Melissa had also quietly, over about 8 months, positioned herself as the de facto operations manager. She was signing vendor invoices. She was the point of contact with the POS system company. She had her name on the business bank account as an authorized signer, which Derek had added without telling me for convenience, he said later. I didn't find out about any of this until 13 months after opening, when Derek called me to update me on some structural changes, and I found out that he and Melissa had filed paperwork to convert Ember Table from a single-member LLC, which it never technically was, since I was a co-owner, into a family partnership, with Melissa listed as a 35% partner. His 70% had become 35% Derek, 35% Melissa. My 30% had not changed on paper. But the nature of the entity had changed, and because of the way the partnership was structured, certain decisions that previously required majority shareholder approval, including capital distributions, now required agreement from all 3 partners, which meant Melissa, who had contributed $0 and had no legal standing in the original agreement, now had effective veto power over my investment returns. I sat with the phone against my ear for a long moment after Derek finished explaining. Did Gloria review this? I asked. We use Melissa's cousin, he said. He's a paralegal. I set the phone down on my kitchen counter and stared at the window above my sink for probably 30 seconds. Then I picked it up again and said, very calmly, Derek, what you just described is a material change to the LLC ownership structure. The investment agreement we both signed explicitly requires written consent from me before any such change can be made. You didn't have my consent. Which means this filing is not valid. There was a pause. Rachel, it's not. We weren't trying to cut you out. Melissa has been running half this place. She deserves to be recognized. I don't disagree that Melissa has contributed. If you wanted to bring her in as a partner, the correct process was to come to me, propose the terms, get my written consent, and amend the agreement. That's what we signed. That's what you agreed to. You're making this into a legal thing. It is a legal thing, Derek. It was always a legal thing. That's why we signed a contract. He said he'd talk to Melissa and call me back. He called back 4 hours later. Melissa had decided apparently that I was being hostile and controlling, that I had always looked down on Derek, that I was threatened by their success. She used the phrase silent investor trying to run the show, which I found interesting given that I had, in fact, been entirely silent for 13 months. Derek didn't exactly defend me. He said he thought we should all sit down and talk. I agreed. We scheduled dinner for the following Saturday. I spent the week between that call and that dinner doing something I should have done sooner. I reviewed every financial document I had access to. I cross-referenced the quarterly statements Derek had been sending me, which I now noticed had become less detailed over the past 2 quarters, against the revenue figures from the restaurant's own social media presence, which had been tagging itself in local press coverage I could easily look up. The numbers didn't line up perfectly, not in a smoking gun way, but enough that I called Gloria on Thursday. She asked me to bring everything to her office Friday morning. I did. Friday afternoon, Gloria called me back. Her voice had that specific, even quality that I'd learned meant she was being careful. Rachel, she said, the unauthorized restructuring alone gives you grounds to challenge the validity of the new partnership filing. But I'd also like to have a forensic accountant look at the Q3 and Q4 distributions, because what you've shown me suggests a possible commingling issue. I asked her what she needed from me. Don't go to that dinner, she said. I didn't go to that dinner. Instead, I sent Derek a certified letter, Gloria drafted it, notifying him formally that I was disputing the validity of the partnership restructuring, that I was invoking the consent clause of our original investment agreement, and that I was requesting a full accounting audit of all distributions and expenses for the previous 6 months. Derek called me 7 times between Saturday evening and Sunday morning. I let them all go to voicemail. Melissa texted me from Derek's phone. I know it was Melissa because Derek doesn't use exclamation points or call people sweetie. The text said things like, "You're destroying your brother's dream over paperwork, and we have investors coming to visit next week. This is the worst possible timing." And finally, "If you do this, you are not welcome at Ember Table, and we will make sure everyone knows what kind of person you are." I screenshotted all of them and forwarded them to Gloria. The following week, something happened that I didn't expect. I got a call from a number I didn't recognize, and because I'd been on edge, I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. It was a man named Paul Okafor. He was the restaurant's primary produce vendor, had been supplying Ember Table since before they opened, had a good relationship with Derek, liked the restaurant. He introduced himself, apologized for calling out of nowhere, and said he'd heard through the supplier network that there was some kind of dispute going on. "I don't want to get in the middle of anything," he said, "but I like your brother, and I think he's gotten himself into something he maybe doesn't fully understand. I've been in this industry for 22 years. I've seen this before." He told me that Melissa had, in the past 3 months, opened accounts with 2 of his competitors using the Ember Table business name, had placed orders, and had canceled them both at the last minute in ways that were unusual enough to be noticed. He didn't know what it meant. He just thought I should know. I thanked him. I told Gloria. She added it to what she was building. The audit request, once filed formally, triggered a response from Derek that I hadn't anticipated. He lawyered up. Not with Melissa's paralegal cousin, but with an actual attorney, and for about 10 days, it felt like things were going to get very bad. His attorney sent a letter arguing that the original investment agreement had effectively been superseded by the partnership filing, which was a legal argument so bad that Gloria actually laughed on the phone, briefly, before turning professional again. But here's what I think Derek didn't account for. I had the contract. I had it signed, notarized, and filed. I had Gloria's correspondence documenting every step. I had the certified letter. I had Melissa's texts. I had Paul Okafor's account of the vendor irregularities, and I had one more thing. About 3 weeks into the dispute, I got a call from Derek's head server, a woman named Yvonne, who had been with Ember Table since the first week and who I had met exactly twice. She asked if she could speak to me privately. I said yes. Yvonne told me that 2 weeks prior, Melissa had gathered the staff and told them that the restaurant was going through a legal challenge from an outside investor, and that they should not speak to me if I came in, and that if they were contacted by anyone from a law firm, they should direct all questions to Melissa. Then Yvonne told me something else. She told me that in the last week, the daily cash receipts, Ember Table still had a cash component from their bar, had been recorded in the POS system, but the physical deposits to the business account didn't match. She'd noticed because she helped close 3 nights a week and initialed the deposit slips. She said she liked working there. She said she didn't like what she was seeing. I asked her if she'd be willing to provide a written statement. She said she would. The next morning, I called Gloria and told her what Yvonne had said. Gloria was quiet for a moment. "Rachel," she said, "I think we need to amend what we're pursuing here. What had started as a contract dispute was now potentially something more serious." Gloria recommended we contact the North Carolina Secretary of State's office regarding the unauthorized LLC restructuring and separately flag the potential financial discrepancies for a more thorough forensic review. Derek called me the next day. This time I answered. He didn't sound angry. He sounded tired. There was a quality in his voice I hadn't heard since we were kids, after our parents separated and he'd come into my room at night and sit on the edge of my bed without saying anything. Just the sound of someone who had been carrying something too heavy for too long. "She told me to do it," he said, not as an excuse, just as a fact. I let the silence sit. The paralegal cousin, that was her idea. She said if we restructured, we'd have more flexibility. I didn't ask enough questions. I trusted her to handle it. "Derek, I know. The cash discrepancies," I said carefully. "Do you know about those?" He didn't say anything for a long time. "I noticed the numbers fell off," he said finally. "She said it was a POS glitch." I wanted to believe her. I didn't say everything I wanted to say in that moment. I didn't say you called me 7 times and left me messages about destroying your dream while knowing the number stalled off. I didn't say you let her send those texts from your phone. I didn't say I showed up for you, Derek, the way you showed up for me, and you let her use that against me. I didn't say any of it. I just asked him what he wanted to do. I want to fix it, he said. Fixing it took 4 months. Melissa did not want to fix it. Melissa retained her own attorney, not the paralegal cousin, and contested the audit findings, disputed Yvonne's account, and at one point filed a counterclaim arguing that I had tortiously interfered in the business relationship by contacting Paul Okafor. That claim was dismissed. The forensic accountant's report, when it came, documented approximately $14,000 in cash receipts over a 5-month period that had not been deposited to the business account. It wasn't a massive number. It was enough. Gloria filed on my behalf to have the unauthorized partnership restructuring declared invalid. The filing was successful. The entity reverted to its original structure. Derek's attorney, separately, initiated dissolution proceedings against Melissa's claim to any equity, a process that was complicated by the fact that they were married, but ultimately supported by the forensic findings. I am not going to tell you Derek and Melissa are divorced. They're not, as of now. That's not my story to tell or my business to follow. What I will tell you is that Melissa has not set foot in Ember Table's kitchen or office since the audit concluded. What I will tell you is that Derek hired a professional operations manager and a bookkeeper, both of whom report to an advisory board that now includes, among others, Paul Okafor's business partner, who had restaurant management experience. And what I will tell you is this. I got my $60,000 back. Not all at once, but structured as a priority repayment over 14 months, with interest, as part of the resolution agreement. My 30% equity stake remains intact. The first profit distribution I received was for $4,200, which arrived as a wire transfer on a Tuesday morning in November while I was eating breakfast. I stared at it for a minute. Then I called Gloria and told her. She said, "That's what the contract was for." The last time I saw Derek in person, we met for coffee at a place near his apartment, not Ember Table, neutral ground. He looked older than I remembered, or maybe I was just seeing him differently now. He wrapped both hands around his mug and looked at the table for a while before he looked at me. "You could have just walked away," he said. "Cut your losses. A lot of people would have." I thought about that, about the 9-year-old in the kitchen at midnight, eating grilled cheese. About the check engine light I'd ignored. About the $800 I'd spent on a contract that he thought was excessive. "I know," I said, "but you taught me not to." He looked up. "You always showed up," I said, "even when it was hard, even when it cost you something." "That's what I was doing." He nodded slowly. He didn't say anything, but something in his face settled, the way a room feels different after you finally open a window that's been stuck shut for too long. We finished our coffee. We talked about other things. The conversation was careful, the way conversations are when something has been broken and is being handled gently while it heals. But it was real. It was us. I drove home on I-85 with the windows down and the October air coming through, and I thought about what Gloria had said. That's what the contract was for. Not to protect myself from strangers, to protect something that mattered enough to fight for. My brother built something real. Someone tried to hollow it out from the inside. And I had 2 choices. Let it happen, or use every careful, deliberate, unglamorous tool available to me to stop it. I chose the tools. I don't regret a single page of that paperwork. I've thought a lot about the version of this story where I just let it go, where I write off the $60,000 as the price of learning something hard about someone I loved, where I tell myself that chasing it would cost more than the money itself, in time, in stress, in whatever was left of my relationship with my brother. I've met people who've made that choice. I don't judge them. Sometimes walking away is the only thing that keeps you intact. But I've also thought about what I would have been walking away from if I hadn't fought. And it wasn't just the money. What Melissa did wasn't an accident. It was a sequence of deliberate decisions made over months. The bookkeeping access, the vendor accounts, the unauthorized restructuring, the cash skimming that Yvonne noticed on the deposit slips. None of that happens by mistake. And what I've come to understand is that schemes like that, only work when the person being taken from is someone who can be counted on not to push back. She read me as someone who would rather keep the peace than read the fine print. She was wrong, but I understand why she thought that. I had spent a long time being exactly that person. The hard truth about what happened, the thing I had to sit with, is that Derek's silence made it possible. Not because he's a bad person, he isn't, but he chose comfort over honesty, and that choice had a cost that landed on me. People do that. They let things happen around them because confronting the truth feels worse than managing the fiction. I understand that impulse. I've felt it. But understanding it doesn't mean accepting the consequences of it. And at some point, I had to decide whether protecting Derek's comfort was worth more than protecting what was mine. It wasn't. There's something I want to say about the contract, because I think people sometimes see legal agreements between family members as a sign of distrust. Like putting something in writing means you're already expecting the worst. Gloria charged me $800 to draft that investment agreement, and my brother thought it was excessive. Looking back, that document was the single most important thing I did in this entire situation. Not because I suspected Derek, but because the contract wasn't about suspicion. It was about clarity. It said, here's what we agreed to, here's what happens if circumstances change, here's how we protect each other. When things went wrong, the contract didn't create a fight, it ended one. I think a lot about Derek in that phone call, 3 weeks into everything, saying she told me to do it, the exhaustion in his voice. The way he said I noticed the numbers felt off and then admitted he'd wanted to believe her explanation. That's not stupidity. That's what happens when you care about someone and you're afraid of what the truth might cost you. But the thing he hadn't calculated was what the silence was already costing him. His business, his integrity, his relationship with me. What I took from all of this isn't a lesson about distrust. It's the opposite. It's that the people worth trusting are the ones who can handle honesty. The ones who don't need you to look away to feel safe. Derek and I are still finding our way back to each other. Slowly and carefully, the way you do when something real has been damaged and you both actually want it to heal. That's its own kind of courage, choosing repair over resentment on both sides. I kept the contract. I kept the equity. I got the wire transfer on a Tuesday morning in November, and I sat with it for a minute, quiet, before I called Gloria. Some things are worth protecting, not because they're worth money, because they're worth the fight.